we're back again, despite ourselves.
Despite our best efforts. Welcome to Whyte Noise, friends.
Where you get to hear Michael and I talk about nothing.
We each get 10 minutes.
10 minutes of it. 10 minutes of nothing.
Based on a topic that last week's guest gave us, which we will reveal soon. So today we have a beautiful, fabulous new guest who I'm very excited to meet, who will be our judge, who will tell us which one of us chatted better.
Candy has worked very hard to establish her criteria for judgment.
Yes. Ryan, who is our guest today?
So we have the lovely Candy Baracat-Donovan with us, who, Candy, were you one of my residents initially at Virginia Tech?
My RA was Marty.
That's right. Well, we were all in the same building.
We were all in the same building. Let's talk about this building that we lived in.
New Res West.
It was the leadership residence hall, right? So it was really people moved in because they wanted, it was co-ed suites that were co-ed, so men and women across from each other, and there was air conditioning.
Oh, lucky you.
So it was a real work hard, play hard kind of a crowd. So we had sex, we had drama. We once had an ice luge in the shared kitchen.
What? I'm sorry. What? You had an ice luge in the shared?
Yeah. The residents who lived there were just those kind of people. I don't know. They had a lot of fun, and they were really like highly driven kids. So we were RAs together, keeping them in line.
Yeah, and I was going to say you were one of Marty's residents. Then you became an RA, right? And then we shared all of the fun duties. Actually, were you there for that story time that I woke up early one morning to somebody's parents had arrived and were losing their shit in one of the suites because the daughter was in this suite and she had I'm assuming some OCD issues. She had like gloves and she was a little awkward, and the roommate was sleeping with her curmudgeonly boyfriend in the room and in the suite, and they were keeping notes on a whiteboard about the voluminous nature of his emissions.
What?
Yes, they were. And the parents did not appreciate it, right? We had a lot of parental visits for a building that had, 18, 19, 20-year-olds in it, yes.
But the one thing I'll say before we kind of get into it here, like one of the things that I appreciate so much about Candy is you were, in my opinion, one of the few people in college that I felt like you always had your shit together. You knew like who you were and what you were about and like what you stood for. And the thing is, I think it still holds true based upon what I know about you today and how you're involved. Like you have a beautiful family. You're extremely involved in your community. You're politically active. Like, it's just kind of incredible. So, yeah, I feel like you've had this kind of mystique, if you will, about you from the very beginning.
Of just competency, apparently.
What a kind. I am an eldest daughter, y'all.
I can see that. I have to say, like, it is 9:00 in the morning. I'm a mess. Ryan's a mess. You signed on, Candy, and you are gorgeous, You look absolutely stunning. Your hair looks perfect. Your makeup's perfect. You're in a cute sweater. You've got your boob mug, and you are, like, prepared.
I don't know if you guys know, this is actually my podcast.
Yes, so I'm so happy to be on your show.
Welcome. Very kind words from both of you, Ryan. It's really funny because I felt like when I was reflecting on this meeting, I was like, we really felt like some of the only adults in the room a lot of times, in many respects. And we just hit it off immediately. We're both Northern Virginia kids, right? So like, yes, we hit it off, and I'm so glad to reconnect.
So wait, before we started, you were telling us a story about a lunch, the ladies who lunch.
Of Loudoun County.
Yes, the ladies of Loudoun County. I am I'm a mom of 3. I live in the suburbs. I run 2 businesses. Life is like a little bit crazy. And yesterday I had a really exciting opportunity to go downtown to a very fancy party, to a tea. And usually when I'm downtown, I'm like demonstrating or meeting with my politician clients. But I got to go to this tea, and we had the most DC experience because we were in this hotel and there were some world leaders there as guests. And so a demonstration arose in the middle of the fancy tea. And I loved it because that's what more of a DC experience can you get, right? Like I drove 45 minutes from the suburbs. I want to see democracy in action.
Yeah.
The vibes in DC have not been good lately, as I don't
really?
have to tell
Yeah.
you.
Shocker.
Very negative vibes. So, I liked it. We got to see democracy in action. It gave me a sense of like things are still happening. So that's good. But it was a really interesting. It was not my daily Friday.
Yeah. Do you know who are the activists? Who are the protesters?
Benjamin Netanyahu was a guest of the hotel.
Oh.
As was the Japanese prime minister. So there was a lot going on. But what's funny is I called the front desk of the hotel and I was like, "Ooh, like, is there still valet?"
But also, like, world must move on. You have to get your car.
I was like, I drove in, right? So, so they said, so the lady at the front desk goes, "Oh, just when you pull up, just ask the Secret Service to move."
Oh, like that.
I did, and they did. So I am a reader of like political like mysteries. I like to watch a lot of dramas on TV. So I'm an idiot. Like, here's the thing. I'm not saying anybody would ever do this, but we went through the X-ray machines. We brought a birthday cake. The birthday cake had to be X-rayed, right?
Uh-huh.
And I felt good about that because I thought, in a geopolitical thriller, you'd get like a well-dressed white lady to bring a birthday cake in, right? And she would be the villain.
Great idea.
So I was glad to see there was solid security there. So once we were inside, I felt the safest that I felt in actually a very long time.
Do you want to share real quick? I'd love to hear you have your businesses. Do you want to share really quickly about those?
Yeah, sure. My businesses on the surface looked very different, but they're pretty much exactly the same job. I have Like a Sister, where I'm a postpartum doula and lactation counselor. So we provide inclusive new parent education and support, all virtually. And I have a business called Politically Connect. I'm a political social engagement consultant. So I help political candidates, Democratic political candidates, with their social media and their social engagement. So practically, it's like I really love people. And so it's fine helping people use their voices effectively in the day-to-day. I listen to a lot of big feelings and use my active listening. I use my mom voice a lot, working with politicians and new parents and sometimes babies is all the same skill set.
Well, we'll make sure, by the way, that we'll tag your businesses when we post, and because that's awesome.
All right. Well, who would you like to go first?
I'm gonna choose Ryan.
Okay, great. Because Ryan usually defines what the word is, so that's a good one to go with. Because I was like, I don't have the definition queued up. So, Ryan, I'm so ready to be entertained and informed as per usual. And then you're gonna get the hot mess that is me. All right, ready?
It's why it works so well.
Let me get out my pen so I can take my notes here.
No joke. It hit me. I texted Ryan at like 12:30 last night, and I was like, "Wait, what's our word again?"
And I had gone to bed, so I think I texted you back at like 6.
20 minutes ago. So I'm super prepared.
Extemporaneous speaking is a skill.
I took a lot of improv class. All right, Ryan, ready?
Yeah.
And go.
All right. So contrapposto. The actual definition is counterpose, and it was introduced by Greek sculptors. And it was a transition from sculpture that stood in like rigid form to more of sculpture standing on one leg with weight shifted over one leg with a slight twist to the body, which produces a more natural pose. It kind of leaned in humanism, bringing humanism into sculpture and more emotion, right? And it had probably its biggest revival in the Renaissance period with maybe one of the most famous sculptures that stands in Contrapposto, which is?
David.
It is David. Michelangelo's David. So I started to get into the whole idea of body as expression and then kind of move into modernism. Like, how do we see it today? And the modern kind of use of it is around identity, gender expression, and defiance. And then oddly enough, Trixie Mattel came up again. So Candy, last week I talked a little bit about Trixie Mattel as it related to the topic, which was two-spirit. So it's not really an LGBTQ plus concept. It's more of like a queer concept where you have somebody who traverses the female to male space as an empathetic leader within their culture. So in the defiance space, Beyonce came up a lot, right? Because if you think about I Am Sasha Fierce album cover, she stands on the front in Contrapposto in an unapologetically feminine pose. She also has leaned in to this in Formation, the Formation music video. And if you think about the Formation music video, it shifts through multiple images of her standing, all of which could be sculpture in terms of how she's positioned herself, which I thought was kind of interesting. Then we get into gender expression, where the queer community starts to come into play, right? So the first place is within, the first thing that comes to mind is Vogue. It's when she chose to focus in on Black and Latin drag culture of that day, right? Where, again, we're trying to traversing gender norms, and we are talking about very early drag. And then if we think about it today, we have Trixie Mattel, who obviously is using a lot of various different types of gender expression to kind of traverse who her personality is, right? And it's the idea of gender fluidity. That gets into the idea of identity and gender identity. And I love the fact that Robert Mapplethorpe came up. And if you think about a lot of Robert Mapplethorpe's art and imagery, right, it's that kind of
Sculptural.
You also think about like a lot of the pictures of the men have very feminine aspects and pictures of women have very masculine aspects. I also liked, like, one of his really famous photos is of Arnold Schwarzenegger flexing. And it's the idea.
Oh, that photo.
Yes. And it's like the idea of like the steroided body bringing that extreme muscular expression, right? So again, it's another form of Contrapposto, bringing that humanality or overexpression to a body or to a human expression. I was going to pause and just kind of ask both of you, do you have a favorite pose? Do you, like, if you think about time and history and you think about people posing, and I think I've traversed a lot of space, do you have one that, like, when you think of somebody striking a pose, and I'm leaning in on Vogue there, what do you think of?
I have one. I really love the story of Joan of Arc because I love the quote, I'm not afraid, I was born for this. And she is pictured like astride a horse, often with a sword. And she, you know, the story says that she dressed in very masculine clothes, right, as she led her army into battle, even though she was a teenage girl. So I that's what I'm picturing when we're talking about kind of traversing gender roles and norms. And, you know, and now women are encouraged to power pose, right? As you walk into a meeting or steepling the fingers.
I didn't know that, though. I didn't know that that's what... I mean, you would know better because you work with so many politicians, like what the move would be. I didn't know about the finger one. I know. I was noticing the
wiggle
pose.
was a little Dr. Evil.
Okay, just the fingertips together steepling.
People don't know what to do with their hands ever. You got to give them direction.
I never do. So thank God somebody's there to tell people what to do.
I walk into all meetings doing this.
Just jazz hands. Yeah. He walks in, he's like, well, welcome. Today we're going to be discussing, you know, that jazz. Like... when I hear strike a pose, my first thought that time was Greta Garbo, just because now I'm thinking about Contrapposto. Like, my first thought is somebody sort of like head over shoulder. Like a quick, if you're like hit a pose and they're doing something, it's a like boop, and they like turn their head over one shoulder, whichever shoulder. And I wonder if it's almost like a defensive reflex. But also, like, my first thought is like all the pictures of Greta Garbo, and she's always like, I want to be alone. But all of her pictures are always sort of like bent over and she like flips her head up and her hair sort of falls. Or like Jessica Rabbit would do that a lot, like that kind of thing.
Oh, Princess Diana, how she would
Princess
down
Diana, like the head down and then like who me, and like drop the one shoulder.
Yeah.
But it gives you that sort of like S shape.
I think it's kind of amazing as you start to think about Contrapposto, like how much life is brought to things through these various kind of moves. And I think both of your highlights kind of demonstrate that, right? Like how these kind of actions and how we present ourselves bring other people into the concept, into the moment, into like what's happening. And that kind of bridges me to a little bit. How am I on time, Michael?
You're at 7 minutes.
Okay, with 3 minutes, I actually have a couple things I think I have time to touch on. So the sculpture thing made me think about, and you know, Candy, growing up in Northern Virginia, we have a lot of Civil War era things around us. And I decided to look into the equestrian statue code So it turns out that it's actually a little bit more of a myth because it's not always consistently true. But if you see a military leader on a horse and all 4 feet are down, the military leader likely was unharmed in war or in battle. If one leg is up, it traditionally means that the leader was wounded but survived. And if the horse is up on 2 legs, with 2 legs up, it means the individual died in battle. Now, there is some truth to it, right? There is some consistency to it, but it is not always true. So it's actually considered a little bit of a myth. But it fits into how we've actually used Contrapposto on animals or on non-humans to help convey given messages. It actually kind of turns out that like all 4 feet down is intended to produce kind of a stoic sort of view of the individual, while 2 feet up in the air or a horse on 2 feet and a person riding it is actually supposed to demonstrate more bravery, which makes a lot of sense to me because you got a bucking horse and you're holding on and you're headed into battle.
Like the Kehinde Wiley sculpture outside. Have you seen the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts? Have you ever seen that one?
No.
It's this like modern, very modern looking black man on a horse that's sort of like, I think, partially reared up as a play on those a lot of those statues which are down in Richmond.
Gotcha.
I gotta think
Did he
about
die in war? No.
No, this is like a modern man. It's like a commentary on it. But now I can't remember what the horse is doing.
So it made me reflect a little bit on like recent media and like really recent. I think it was this week. Did you all see Bill Nye's runway walk this week?
No. Bill Nye was on a runway.
I just love all those words together in one sentence.
Well, I think this is what actually makes it so kind of cool. So Bill Nye was in the Blue Jacket Fashion Show, which is part of New York Fashion Week. It's specifically a fashion show that's organized by the Zero Cancer Project, which is a focus on raising money for prostate cancer and prostate cancer awareness. Bill Nye's father battled prostate cancer, so it has a personal association for him. But he walked out this week. He was wearing a bomber jacket with shorts with black wingtips laced up with calf high black socks. So it was kind of a nerdy look, but the bomber jacket was adorned with Greek gods and various contrapposto. So they were all like, in their various shapes and forms. And then he brought his own kind of to it. So he walked out and had the initial walk, the very like model walk, but got to the end, flipped around, put on some glasses, flipped around, did this weird shuffle across the stage to go back, and then flipped around and his glasses fell off. And then he picked them back up and put them on and saluted. And I liked it because it was kind of like unapologetically him. So he brought this beautiful humanism to modeling, if you will, this nerdiness to modeling. And, it was like relaxed yet confident. And yeah, so I was like, this is just a really cool example of Contrapposto right now with somebody that I think is really kind of cool.
That is time. Oh, no, it was time a little while ago. But I was just you brought up Bill Nye as it hit 10. And I was like, I can't stop you now.
No.
Like, I want to hear about Bill Nye being a fabulous model. Also, Candy, I really appreciate that you have like notes going on over there.
Oh, I'm taking my job very seriously.
I'm so impressed.
You don't know what they say, however.
Okay, are you ready?
Go.
Okay, so my first thought... Oh, wait, shh. My first thought also, Ryan, was like gay. When I heard Contrapposto and it was like you lean to one side, I was like, cool, gay. And my first thought was this TikTok song that was viral. Okay, wait, I'm going to play it for you. Okay, that song. And you know when it was going and it was like a guy standing up and he was like, when she thinks I'm this. And then it's like, ding. And he like hits a super gay little pose on that ding sound where that was my first thought, where it's like looking at somebody and they're like, oh yeah, that's a really like, burly straight dude. And then like on the ding, he just like leans to one side and you're like, nope, gay. Like, so that was my first thought. But then I was like, okay, well, let me look up something legitimate. So I was curious about Contrapposto in history. Well, actually, like it's funny actually that we both went to sort of gender things, right? This is where I'm riffing. This isn't what I looked up, but I did think this was interesting, Ryan, where you're talking about like that the idea of Contrapposto is more feminine, that, you know, even whether you're male, female, whatever, when you're in a pose like that, it is a more feminine pose, which I think is interesting because it's sort of like made me think of fragile masculinity. And especially, Candy, when you just said like power poses, how women now are in a more like squared stance because it's traditionally more masculine. But if you think about something that's more stable, because where I was going to talk about was the David, because that is one of perhaps the most famous example, right, in art of Contrapposto. Like he's in such a curved position. But when you look up what Michelangelo was going for, it's David before Goliath, which at the time nobody was really doing. They were mostly doing David after, like with a head. He was doing David before. And the reason he's in that sort of curved pose is he's in a state of readiness. He's in a state to like take on the giant. And if you think about when you're bracing something for real, like you're not going to stand stiff straight. Your feet are going to be apart. You're going to be bent. You're going to be probably in a little bit of a twist because you're ready to either get hit, to push, or to like move. And if you're just straight square, it's very easy to knock you over. So I think it's interesting that that's the more masculine pose. Like, and the more feminine pose is a twisted one, which in actuality is a better state for readiness.
More solid.
It's actually more solid. Like if you're on a subway train and if you see people on the subway, the people who fall over when it moves are the ones that are standing square.
With the locked knees.
With locked knees. And yet that's the most stereotypical masculine pose is in fact the most fragile pose.
Love it.
And yet it presents strength. And it's like a false presentation, which I'd never thought about until this moment. And I was like, how true to what it is.
I agree.
Like a facade. It's a facade because if you just turn,
it's
just
such a facade. And if you go, over you go. Whereas like the more traditionally feminine pose, which apparently seems weaker, is in fact much stronger. And I hadn't thought about that until, Ryan, you were talking. So I'm so glad you went first. Because that's a big thing with the David statue is like he's meant to be ready. He's thinking, he's moving, he's like ready to leap into action is what Michelangelo was going for. So that was the one thing I did kind of want to talk about because I did think that was interesting.
Michael, I'll tell you. So when I started into my thing and I was like, yeah, one of the most famous ones. And I was like, do you know who it is? So I was kind of reading you and you went, David.
Oh, I was like, fuck.
and because I was like, and then when you came back to it, I was like, oh, like I'm happy I didn't spend too much time on it.
Because I did actually research.
I could tell you were like, ah, shit.
But I was ready to talk about David because that's what I read about for half an hour. And I think it's actually because I've been to Florence twice, not to brag. It's just like it happened to work out that I got to go. And the last time I went, I got to see the actual David. Like the first time I went, we just saw some replicas in the squares because there's like 30 replicas just dancing around the world. And this last time I actually went and stood in line and went to see the real one. And it's magnificent. But the story of David, I think, is interesting that the block of marble that he came from was a reject block, which I didn't know. Two other artists got it. Like first, one other artist was going to do a statue and then he got the block of marble and it was like kind of busted and super veiny. And he was like I can't. He like started and he was like, yeah, it was a little too veiny for him. And he was like, I can't work with this.
I don't mind veiny.
So he was like, no. And then they gave it to another artist and he started to chisel away and he was like, no, there's too many like holes on the inside. Like this isn't good, Gibbe. And then they ended up giving it to Michelangelo. And part of the reason he did sort of have a little bit more of a contrapposto was because he was working around the sort of like imperfect marble. But it's so like, again, how human that he started out as this like deeply imperfect thing. And then he became this really beautiful thing. Because Michelangelo...
The story that Michelangelo said that like he just released the David from the marble.
Yeah, because it was sort of a busted piece and this like beautiful thing emerged from it.
You know what's funny is I didn't realize I learned something and I feel kind of silly for not knowing this. I didn't know that was David from David and Goliath.
Yeah, which broke norms at the time. Yeah, because most people wanted to show him as like the hero after. So usually there was like another block of marble that was like the head and of the slain Goliath. And this was like him at the ready. So it was like a really exciting thing for people at the time. So like we don't see David like this typically. So he was a big hit when he was unveiled. People loved him.
By the way, Michael, it also goes back to that episode where we talked about small phalluses and how they're actually more respected at that time. They were more representative of somebody ready for battle versus some giant comical thing hanging off their body.
Yeah, because David does, when you look at him, he's just got kind of a little penis, which it's funny. They sent a replica to Queen Victoria as like a gift. That's one of the one that's in England is a replica they gave to her, and her Victorian sensibilities were so shocked they had to cover up his penis. So still, if you go to, I want to say it's in the Victorian Albert Museum, they have it like covered with a little fig leaf.
I think Queen Victoria was a bit of an actress.
I know. I think she would have been totally fine.
She's like, oh,
but,
well.
you know, oh my goodness, what is that little thing? But speaking of proportion, I was curious because, you know, when you see the David, his hands are massive. Like he's supposed to be like the ideal picture of the male form, and yet the proportions are all really wonky.
Yeah, it's messed up.
I did not know. It's because he was meant to be seen from a below, like a certain angle. So Michelangelo knew that he was putting him in a square. And like the David's huge, right?
So he was accounting for...
He's as tall as a giraffe, right? He's very tall. They say like he's at the height of a 2-story building or an adult giraffe, which I feel like those aren't the same, but it's fine. So he's big, and they were putting him in a square, so he was meant to be looked at from below, which, you know, who doesn't want to look at David from below? So that's why the hands and the head are the size that they are, because when you see them from the angle they're meant to be looked at, it actually is like correct. Like your brain sort of fixes it, which I thought was interesting about him. I'm trying to see if there were any other like fun. Oh, the David is slightly cross-eyed. I don't know if you know this. That's like there's a lot of little imperfections in him, which again makes him very inherently human, but he's just a little cross-eyed. One eye is looking straight and the other eye is looking just a little off. And it made me think of, you know, when you meet people like that sometimes and you don't know where to look. And I'm so that person who doesn't quite know what to do in that situation sometimes. And I was like, oh no, if I met David, I'd be so like, wait, which eye do I look at, the right or the left? And like, I had a professor like that in college, Professor Friedman, and like, you never quite knew. And it was really, because he would stare at you, but one eye, you just didn't know which one was looking at you at any given time. So you always had to be sort of on guard. And David would be that guy. You'd be like, he's so beautiful, but it's a little unsettling.
Well, I was going to say, do you think David is constantly flattered because he sees his crowds as twice as big as they are? Maybe that's how he sees his penis.
I think he's just a grower and not a shower. I think, because you know what they say about, you know, men with big
cheers
hands.
to those guys. I like those guys.
Cheers to those guys. But those are my fun little factoids about the David that sprung to mind. There are a bunch, but those were my favorite ones. The cross-eyed one was really my favorite. I was like, oh no, David. But that's it. That'll be my presentation on Contrapposto is just gay and then David.
Oh, ding. You were right at time.
Oh my God, thank you. Yeah, so now your turn to
oh, you
judge
guys.
us.
Who is the winner?
This is hard. I mean, Ryan, I very well researched, and I felt like I was in like a college level course, which is a very appropriate given our relationship. You did your research. I really appreciate it.
Professor Ryan,
I'm glad you went first. And so I feel like you gave the foundation that then allowed Michael your piece to come up. But I have to say, I think I have to pick the second one because simply of the phrase fragile masculinity.
Oh,
That's something we should be talking about every day. So I'm gonna have to say I picked that one, but you were standing on the shoulders of a giant.
thank you. And it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Ryan's initial presentation. So you're very, very.
Right.
this is the
You're
most
so
complimentary loss I've ever had. So thank you. So, Candid, you have our next word.
I do have the next word, and this is an homage to the way that Ryan and I met. So when you are a resident advisor, you have certain nights where you are on, Ryan?
Duty.
So duty, not duty, duty. It can be a tax. It can be a sense of duty, right? Or you could talk about duty.
Oh, fun. How did you arrive at it? I'm always interested to know.
I used my friend, my familiar ChatGPT, I had become and I don't know, can you be an amateur expert? I love.
You're talking to
using
two
AI.
right here.
I was going to say, ChatGPT had a heavy hand in being ready for this.
Yeah. I'm getting ready to teach a workshop about using AI in education. I love it. I use it with all of my clients. I teach my kids how to use it and to understand it, right? Because it is the way of the future. And so I just I had a little conversation because my chat knows me very well, about Ryan, how you and I met. And I was trying to think of something I could tie in. And one of the roles of our first job was to be
Being on duty. On duty.
I think it attracts people who have a sense of duty. I liked being on call. I liked helping people,
I did too.
right?
Yeah.
So, it was nice to help a resident who had invited a guest back to their room, but then forgotten their room key and needed me to unlock it for them.
The most exciting part of the job.
I liked it better than the drunk people that peed places,
Oh my God, I have so many stories like that. Or do you remember were you there when we found that guy growing weed in his closet?
What?
The first time. I mean, it happened more than once, but yes, he had quite the little
set up.
We had a lot. I told you we had a lot of drama. We had a resident advisor sleeping with residents. We had the marijuana growing.
I don't recall that one. Who was sleeping?
We'll talk offline.
God.
He got replaced.
All right. Well, thank you so much,
Candy. Lovely.
Candy, you're
Thank
the best.
you.
This was great.
Do you do repeat guests? And can I be one?
I would love that.
Yeah, 100%.
I would be.
Yay. So next week, Ryan, we will do our duty as best we can.